Big one. All right. Water. Oh my, we have a fire. Anesthesia. Whoa. We are cutting off the O2. Oh my God. Oh my God. We can cut off the music. What else are we doing? Oh my.
Take the brakes off.
Okay. Turn the oxygen off. Good. Get the drapes off your patient.
Yep.
Good. All right. So how's our patient doing?
She's fine.
All right. We're looking kind of rough.
Assessing her airway.
All right.
Assessing airway.
So yes. So at this point, our patient is burned. But hopefully, if we've done this quick enough, we're not having to evacuate the room, right? Like we've poured saline on it, it's out, we've gotten the drapes off so it's not smoldering below, right?
Right.
Now when we look at her, she clearly is burned around the airway. This is typical. It is typical that if you are working up here and you have an open airway, whatever fire you have is going to follow the oxygen. That's how that for real works. So at this point, what anesthesia is most likely going to request is to get a glide scope in here. They'll put the patient under general, get a view of the airway, make sure that we're not visualizing any burns. Assuming the airway is fine, they'll intubate the patient. We'll either finish the operation, assuming that we're okay to do so, or we're going to get this patient out of here. And it's going to be dependent on the surgeon and the anesthesia and how your patient's doing. So at the initial outbreak of the fire, when we've poured the saline on it, and it's just y'all, it's your surgeon, your scrub, your circulator, and your anesthesia. The first thing you want to do is after you've addressed with the saline, you want to call for help. So you can call anesthesia stat in your room, call the front desk and say, we've got a fire. You want as much help in here as you can, just in case this went further than you think it did, okay? If your fire is not out within 1 minute, you need to get out of the room. You need to leave the room. If you can't contain it for whatever reason, get out of the room with your patient.
With the patient.
Take the patient with you. Any questions so far? Yes.
Do we shut off gas?
There is a gas shut-off valve out there. You're welcome to shut off the gas if you have to. Now look, as soon as anesthesia turns off the O2, you've cut off the supply. Now if it gets out of hand, absolutely, just turn the gas off. But yes, typically speaking, when you see the smoke and you've poured saline on it and you've gotten the drapes off and it's gone that quick, they've cut their O2 off, you're probably not going to go any further than that if you've caught it that early, in all seriousness. So let's talk about preps. This lady has a lot of hair. So one of the risks, especially with working up here and using ChloraPrep, is that it runs. We all know it runs. So one of the things you want to check is what size prep are you using? Small. Okay, small. If you need to get a second one, get you a second one. But don't use the big prep up here for a port or for a tray. You don't need all that. It's going to run. And the first thing lawyers are going to ask you is, well, what size prep did you use? Was the surface area the correct size for the prep that you chose? They're going to ask you that. Did you wait the 3 minutes to let it dry? Yes, we did. Well, then did it pull in the hair? Okay, so how long is it once it pulls in the hair? At least 45 minutes to an hour. At least. Don't let it pull in the hair. That's another reason to not use the big prep up there, because it's harder to control which way it's running, right? All right, so minimize that. If you are, most of our cases up here now are not IV sedation with local. Most of them at least have an LMA. But occasionally we still do one under MAC or IV sedation with local. So we do want to be careful of that. Fire risk assessments, are we doing that in the rooms? Our circulators have that in the charts. It's either a 1, 2, or a 3. 3 is your highest risk. That means you have an open airway, you're working above the xiphoid process, you have a fire starter of some sort, whether that's a bovie, a light source, or whatever, right? So we want to pay attention to those things. When we do a fire risk assessment and you include that in your timeout, folks kind of need to keep an ear out and say, okay, this one, we might want to watch a little closer than than when we're jamming to the music over there, okay? We really need to pay attention. The only way you're gonna put out a fire that quick is if everybody's paying attention. If the scrub who's scrubbed in is doodling on a back table, or whoever's doodling somewhere, or we're in a really, really great involved conversation about something, and you're not paying attention to what you're doing, that's a real fine opportunity to miss that smoke. Now, I can tell you the one I was in didn't even smoke that much. It literally was a flashback. All it was a flash of light, almost like when it arcs. You do a laparoscopic case and it gets char on the end and it'll arc. That's what it looked like. It looked like an arc. And then we saw just the faintest of smoke. And when we pulled the drapes off, it was just like that, except even more involved. Like it was 3rd degree all the way across. So what happened? Your drapes are meant to not flame. They smolder. So what happens when the longer those drapes sit there, it's just burning underneath and you're not seeing it. That's why you want to get the drapes off as fast as you can. Get them off the patient, get them on the ground. Any questions about that? Okay. So anesthesia, if you're doing a trach, we really want to make sure we cut the O2 off before we enter the trachea. Now, I do know that there are patients that are critical enough that they're not cutting it off for a lengthy time prior to the incision into the trachea. Some of them just are that sick and they wouldn't live if you did. So what I've told the CRNAs is they have to use their best judgment, but then the team has to communicate with anesthesia to say, we're about to go there. I know Dr. Sarafi is pretty good about it. I don't know about the other physicians, but I know he's really good about saying, you know, are y'all okay if I make the incision now? And then we'll either, you know, wait a minute, go back to room air instead of the straight O2, or whatever they do. But you need to communicate with each other. That's a real important piece of that, okay? Let's see, any questions? No, yes.
When he's getting ready to go in, do they communicate with the tech or whoever to get that Bovie out of there and don't give it to them unless everybody know you're finna use it?
Yes,
if
that's
that
a
air
good
is still coming in there.
That's a good point. Get your Bovie out of the way. Use your Bovie holster so you're not accidentally leaning and activating a Bovie when you're not supposed to. Light sources, they need to be on standby unless they're in use. Don't lay them on your drape. Those things get hot. You know, you can easily burn a hole right through that.
Even with the tip of the lens.
Yes. Lasers should always be on standby unless they are actively using it. Don't ever leave a laser on or off of standby unless they're actually using it. It needs to be on standby because those are great fire starters. Okay. All right. Anybody else? I hope you never have one, but if you do, I hope that you will react quick enough so that we can minimize the harm to the patient. If you don't react quick enough, then now instead of just having superficial burns and it follows the oxygen, where does that go? Down your airway, into your lungs. One of the scarier ones probably are people using lasers. They're intubated. That's a sure enough torch thrower straight to the lung. Okay?
That beam hit that tube.
Yes. So, again, safety always needs to be first. I know we get in a routine. These incidences are rare for us back here, which is a great thing, but it's all the more reason to pay that much attention and to take scenarios like that seriously and don't get complacent about it. We get in a routine. You've done it for 10, 15, 20 years. You think, oh my gosh, I've never had one. You've done everything right. You've taken every precaution you should have. It can still happen to you, and it will. You do it long enough, things are going to happen. So just know and keep in the back of your head that we need to keep the safety part of that first, okay? Cool. If y'all ever have any questions, feel free to ask. Think we did okay? Did we save her, Jeff?
I think so.
Yay!